Now the real question is this list canon? Hey guys, MasakoX here. The Dragon Ball Z movies. I think it's safe to say that the vast majority of you out there have watched at least one of these ideas and stories, and if you haven't, you really should. I strongly urge you to give these a watch because they are very much worth your time. It's a really interesting and compelling snippet as to what the state of Dragon Ball Z was when they actually appeared in Japanese cinemas back in the early 1990s. Typically, there were 2 movies released every year between 1989 and 1996, with a total of 13 original theatrical releases, with of course 2 new ones in the 2010s. With the upcoming release of Dragon Ball Super Broly at the end of this year, and us getting it in the West hopefully at the beginning of 2019, it has actually shown that the whole line of Dragon Ball Z movies has now formally come to a close. So we can say, with full confidence, that there are 15 Dragon Ball Z movies. And yes, I know about the specials, you know, Bardock, Father of Goku, History of Trunks, Path to Power, and of course, Episode of Bardock, but they don't count because they weren't formal theatrical releases what we're covering today. Now that the nomenclature has been retired, we can actually take a look at it. As regards to rules, apart from what I just said, there aren't that many. And okay, there is a technicality. It has to have the phrase Dragon Ball Z in the title. I just thought I'd clear up that little chestnut before we find out what exactly is the coolest Dragon Ball Z movie. Oh, these? Well, I mean, not only did I think the movies were pretty cool, or the ones on this list, but I think that these are pretty cool in their own right. I found them on Shade Tree and I liked them so much that I reached out to them and asked whether they could supply me a pair of the Troubadour frames in silver, which are what these are. As for the finish, you can either have them in wood or in titanium. And just look at the box that it comes in. Real wood. That's nice. All of the lenses are polarized and you can even use your prescription for a special selection of glasses which look and feel really premium. Check out the set I'm wearing using the link in the description and use the discount code MASAKO5 to get $5 off your next purchase. And all proceeds go towards funding this channel. Thank you very much. And here's to rounding up the summer, looking and feeling pretty chill. So let's kick off with number 10, Broly, the legendary Super Saiyan. Yeah, Broly is on this list, and for a good reason. Had this movie been released in isolation with neither of its 2 sequels ever seeing the light of day, ever, for a movie, this story isn't too bad. It's our favorite gang fighting a Saiyan who is capable of destroying an entire galaxy without a second thought. We'd only just gotten used to the prospect of having planet breakers in Dragon Ball Z, but to then have galaxy breakers in our midst? Oh man, the stakes were indeed raised for this one. Granted, having a Saiyan as the main baddie had already been done with the likes of Turles and Tree and Might, but this was the first time we were seeing a Super Saiyan, the legendary Super Saiyan that we'd first heard of in the Namek saga, and now it was finally realized. It was the natural next step, and it was also the next step in terms of the visuals of Dragon Ball Z, which began with the Yamamuro style of drawing, which is still used to this day, albeit being phased out with the advent of the upcoming new Broly movie. Now I think about it, Broly seems to be ringing in change all the time. The runtime was also unprecedented, with it being over an hour long, whereas before, and actually afterwards, all of the movies were between 30 to 50 minutes. Not this, this was an hour and 10. Most of the time these kind of movies that would be shown at Japanese fairs would act as a double feature. Not this one though, this got front and center attention. It propelled Broly into the spotlight and he's not left it since. And it would have been higher on this list had Broly, you know, had a much more compelling reason as to be fighting Goku and Vegeta. Do I really need to even explain it? It's been done to death even on this channel. Number 9, The Dead Zone. Now, even though this was the first Dragon Ball Z movie, it was actually one of the last Dragon Ball Z movies that I ever got to see. And that was only because I was less inclined to watch the early Dragon Ball Z movies as a teenager. I was more inclined towards the later stuff, and it was only afterwards when I actually matured and leveled out that I decided to catch up with everything. I regret that a lot because this movie really set the precedent as to what we would expect in Dragon Ball Z content in general, albeit with a slight hark back to the original Dragon Ball, with its own flair and sense of mystery and adventure. But sure enough, gone were the days of simple baddies who just wanted to overthrow governments. We're talking about baddies who wanted to rip holes in dimensions and then unleash hell-like armies upon the planet. That's pretty big. That's much bigger than the Red Ribbon Army. It was also one of the last outings for Goku's trusty power pole, and it really did mark the end when martial arts were at the top end of Dragon Ball Z's content, and we started to see more and more beam attacks and power-ups. But don't think that martial arts being at the forefront died with a whimper. Oh no. There is some really impressive choreography here, which needs to be addressed, and if you're a true Dragon Ball Z fan, you need to give Dead Zone a look in. Having said that though, the story isn't exactly gripping, with Garlic Jr. not exactly being the most compelling villain out there, even though he was actually pretty successful in gaining the Dragon Balls. His stature, or lack thereof in the fandom, was sealed when he came back in the Dragon Ball Z filler, and being absolutely derided. So, yeah. It's safe to say that Garlic Jr. didn't exactly leave a good impression. Number 8, Resurrection F. This movie makes the list purely for its recent release, as well as the fact that the animation was just simply incredible. I'll just say that. Leagues above what the super equivalent was. I mean, you don't need me to say that. Let me know down in the comments, by the way, if you got to see Resurrection F in the cinemas and what you thought. The story was a pretty simple one. Frieza was back and he wanted to show off his new duds with the form of Golden Frieza. The Saiyans that had previously bested him were going to have to fight him again, and despite the very odd plot point that he trained for just 4 months, now the fact that Frieza had to take on a whole new level and actually do some training, unlike in the last one, proved that this was a whole new character for a whole new age of Dragon Ball. It was embraced by the fandom and kept Frieza relevant in the days of Super Saiyan Blue. But what keeps his story from being higher on the list is that the plot isn't exactly innovative, as I just said. It may be simple, but it was a little too simple. It was more of an action film, although Battle of Gods was the complete package. Resurrection F was a decent sequel, but with the inclusion of Beerus and Whis, it felt a little forced. It was like Toei was thinking, we made a lot of money here, so let's just stick in a lot of things that will make a lot of profit. Battle of Gods felt a bit more genuine, you know? Number 7, Wrath of the Dragon. Now, let me just say this first and foremost. Dragon Fist. Just Dragon Fist. In all seriousness though, Wrath of the Dragon was the perfect way to cap off the original theatrical run of Dragon Ball Z. Goku and friends have to take on a kaiju. Yeah, a kaiju. And the kaiju in question? Oh my god, it's absolutely horrifying. No matter what way you look at it, even now, Hirudegan is pretty terrifying. Imagine if you're 10 years old. I mean, okay, the first time I saw it was 16, but still, it was really scary. Like a skull on a big rock's head, and then you see a big cicada. It's just like, ugh. With the addition of Trunks and Tapion's subplot, and trying to understand how Trunks would mature, it was a really nice little addition, and a nice little tribute to Chrono Trigger, by the way. And I do appreciate the fact this movie tried to answer some question as to the origins of Trunks' sword as well as future Trunks, even though ultimately it kind of raised more questions than it answered. Number 6, Tree of Might. Now this is how you introduce a rogue Saiyan. Initially, Turles is a low-class Saiyan who had to claw his way to the top after Frieza destroyed his home planet. He managed to secure himself a crew, a ship, and a means to be able to show off his power amongst the galaxy. Now with his posse, he had the Tree of Might ready to attack Earth and prove to everyone that low-class Saiyans can rise above the Saiyan elites and conquer all. Unfortunately, he was a little late to the party because Goku had already proved that against the Prince of all Saiyans, so little late to the party there, Turles. The animation and choreography in this movie was absolutely sublime, even though it kind of sealed the deal that Dragon Ball Z was going to be a whole different animal, and it really changed after Lord Slug. And this is why Tree of Might holds a good place on this list. It was kind of like the swan song to original pure martial arts based choreography, and showed that Ki Blasts and Spirit Bombs were going to be the name of the game. Number 5, Cooler's Revenge. Fun fact, by the way, this is the first Dragon Ball Z movie I ever saw. I remember having a poor quality rip of this movie back in 2001 when trying to find a Dragon Ball Z movie was very hard to come by. And I was very confused as to what it was because I'd only just seen the Namek Saga and I thought this was like an episode or something, or like a special? I didn't know it was an actual movie. To my young eyes, the difference between Cooler and Frieza was jaw-dropping. And actually, I kind of liked Cooler more back in the day because he got the job done. As soon as Cooler arrives on Earth, he spots that Goku has a son and just wants to stop and end things. And yet at the same time, he still fell in the same pitfalls that his brother had. So it was the same, but different. It connected the two. This movie acted as a strong turning point for my love of Dragon Ball, and actually getting to see a whole new medium of the series really opened my eyes as to what was possible for the entire franchise. Its animation and story were both colourful and fascinating. I'm really envious of kids back in the day. They got to see that on the big screen. Whoa. Number 4. The world's strongest. Kaioken! The icy realms, the scientific villains, the giant mech fighting against Goku, something we hadn't really seen before in Dragon Ball Z? Yeah, okay, I'm sold. That plot is amazing. Also, it began the relationship between Gohan and Piccolo in a big way, through the gift of song no less. Despite originally seeing this movie out of order, the plot seemed really fresh, and I really regret that I didn't see this movie sooner. It was actually the last DBZ movie that I caught up with. Well, I mean, that's of course except Second Coming, but I'm never going to be seeing that one. I adored how Goku handled himself in this movie, and the fact that he had to fight Piccolo one last time, harking back to the 23rd World Martial Arts Tournaments, was a nice little homage there to the days of original Dragon Ball. After I caught up with the original Dragon Ball, I truly appreciated this little nod even more. Also, Gohan for the first time was actually really useful outside of his rage bursts, so that was a whole little facet, getting to see Gohan doing his thing. And it also paved the way for a future entry that I'm going to talk about in a bit. Number 3. Battle of Gods. Okay, this one is being seen through rose-tinted specs. I originally saw this movie back in 2014 in a special screening which Chris Sabat and Ian Sinclair hosted. There were only about 100 other people in the room, so it was a very intimate screening of the Battle of Gods movie outside of America. This assured that whatever I was about to see on the screen was something I would treasure for years to come. Luckily, for the integrity of this list, the content matched the memory. This movie tore apart the boundaries that we'd gotten used to with Dragon Ball Z prior to that. It opened the door to countless universes, even greater powers, as well as a whole new type of god and level of hierarchy in the godly realm of the Dragon world. Beerus and Whis were not only some of the better baddies in Dragon Ball Z, but they turned out to be really fantastic characters in their own right, and were truly embraced by the community and the fandom, as well as the wallets of Toei. Seeing DBZ content with digital effects and CGI and brand new techniques actual on a really huge screen was jaw-dropping, something I'd never seen before, and I was so glad that Dragon Ball Z was getting to be able to go into the 2010s with a brand new spirit and a brand new energy behind it. The package was there, it felt so right, and I knew that the future of this show would be bright. Number 2. BOJACK Unbound. To me, this is the perfect victory lap movie. We had just witnessed the Cell games, and that in itself was a big experience, so this movie felt like a little treat for after that. This was something that we could just wind down and get to see some relaxed content, a tournament by the sea, some characters that we got to see fight, one last time seeing Future Trunks, and dare I say, Future Trunks in this movie's looking good. Then we get to see a gang of well-dressed space pirates, and oh yeah, getting to see Super Saiyan 2 one last time, with also Gohan being in Goku's trademark gi. So that was pretty special in itself. It was a fun and enjoyable experience. I will say though, it would have been better to see Gohan and BOJACK's ultimate battle not take place in a barren cityscape like we kinda saw throughout the most part of the original Broly movie. So that could have been changed, but it's only a little nitpick. I have to nitpick here. Because also you gotta understand, this was the only movie I think that Goku really didn't play much of a part of except give some kind of running commentary. So you gotta give that some credit. And yeah, okay, he did give some help with Gohan in terms of motivation, but Gohan had to do the actual deed. Number 1, and now my favorite Dragon Ball Z movie, Fusion Reborn. I love this movie. The animation, the comedy, the story, the villain, even though he's a bit of a cut and paste of Majin Buu, but still, he was pretty cool and compelling. The use of Super Saiyan 3 without the crutch of limited energy, and not to mention some really innovative and new techniques of composition using computers, which really gave Dragon Ball Z a whole new perspective and inclusion, as well as evolution. It was just fantastic. And getting to see Pikkon in this movie was fantastic as an ally to Goku. And yeah, I know he's a Dragon Ball Z filler character, but we really need to see him again in some kind of other medium outside of the video games. Oh yeah, and Lebu. Yeah, Lebu's cool too. And to top it all off, we got to see Gogeta. Gogeta is my favorite. Sorry, Vegeta. We did get Vegeta later on in the TV series, but that was after we got Gogeta. Such an exquisite example as to why DBZ is so special, especially to me. So there we go. These are my top 10 Dragon Ball Z movies. If this list differs to your list, I would very much love to see it in the comments below. So let's get this discussion going. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. Until the next one, be sure to like and subscribe. Catch you later!